The meeting will come to order of the Ways and Means meeting on May 28, 2014. The first thing on the agenda, well, let me see who's here from the committee first. Councilor Brian Arrigo, glad to have you back. Councilor Morabito, Steve Morabito, Councilor Patch, and myself, the chairman. We also have Councilor Haas here and Councilor Powers. And I will go to the committee members first, and the other councilors can speak after that. We're going to start off with motion number 14-012, motion related to the City Council's office supply account. Any councilors want to speak on this? 'Cause all I'm going to do is send this out to the council for a vote as a whole. I mean, it's. I think we had this on here for quite a while, and I do apologize for that, for some of the stuff lingering in the committee. So we'll send that out to a council of the whole vote. 14-012. Second thing on the agenda is 14-033, the waste fraud abuse policy. I think George Zoni would like to speak on that.
Thank you. Yes, the city at this time does not have a waste, fraud, and abuse policy, and one of the requirements under the Justice Department, from whom we receive grants, is that we have this policy in place. This policy is drafted in the same manner that others across the country have been drafted. The reporting the line of reporting is the same in just about every, is actually the same in every city that I researched. And the way that, the reason for this is because it will give the city and the employees of the city a manner in which they can report any waste, fraud, or abuse, and they can do it anonymously. So we feel that I think if you go downstairs in the hallway down in the basement, you'll see the state fraud, waste, and abuse policy. And it also takes into account here the whistleblower protection policy here. And what it does is, as I said, it gives an employee the path to take when they do see somebody committing any type of fraud, any type of waste, or any type of abuse. It's pretty much self-explanatory in its nature, and the reason for it, the prevention detection. There's a commitment to for confidentiality and anonymity, and we also included the definitions of fraud, waste, and abuse, the responsibilities of the employees and citizen customers. But although the Director of Finance cannot force a citizen to report any fraud, waste, or abuse, we urge them to do so, because every complaint or any issue that is brought up will be fully investigated, and there are a number of examples here that what would constitute fraud, waste, and abuse and some of the activities, and then it gives you the responsibility of the Director of Finance's office once he or she receives a complaint. If you remember some years back, we had a problem at the library, and there was some fraud that had taken place then. If you remember, I led the investigation at that time. We had the outside auditors do a defalcation audit to identify exactly what the amount of monies, or estimate the amount of monies that were taken from the city, and fraudulently taken from the city, and as a result of that, it ended up with going to the district attorney's office, and then further to a trial and a conviction. So it is important to do this. And again, as I said, this is the same format as cities and towns across the country use. and it's something that would be very important. It's something we'll give to each employee so they know what their responsibilities are, and we will be urging each employee to, if they see any fraud or waste or abuse in any nature, that they report it to the Director of Finance, and again, they can do that in a minute. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to respond to them. So,
Thank you, George. Councilor Arrigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George, just one quick thing. You mentioned the signage downstairs that directs folks to I think the state fraud, waste, and abuse. Are we going to have something that is consistent with what our city fraud, waste, and abuse policy will be, so that people don't get conflicting ideas? Because I think downstairs it says to contact the Inspector General's office or the Attorney General's office. If we have something that is just consistent with what the new policy is, so that everyone's getting the same message and they know who to report it to.
That's what we intend on doing. We intend to put up signage and have each and every one of the employees receive a copy of this, and then urge them to do so.
Okay, great.
If they do so.
Great.
If they see any.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Morabito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I commend you, Mr. Anzoni, and the mayor. I think this policy, what it does, it sets the tone for the city, and it shows that we have zero tolerance for fraud, waste, abuse. And I like how this policy highlights that there will be no retaliation on whistleblowers, and I think that's the main focus of this policy, because we want people to come out and if they see something, say something.
Right.
Thank you.
And I do want to say that too. It's the mayor and the city council and the financial officers who have zero tolerance for any commission of concealment of acts of waste, fraud, and abuse. So it's a joint effort amongst us all.
George, I agree with Councilor Morabito. I think this is long overdue. One thing I would like to see, and at least each department head, if you couldn't, maybe have them, to a course of a month or 2 months, whatever, is sit down every employee and go over this thing so they can't say when something does happen that they didn't know about it, didn't read it.
Right.
Because I hear that a lot in different policies that are written. First time that something happens, I didn't know that, I never read it, never seen it, but maybe, they're going to have to sign it to say they read it, but at least explain. I mean, there's stuff in here that, they may not understand exactly what it means. One other question I have, and
I just want to answer though one more thing. We do plan to have when we distribute this, we're not necessarily going to hand it out to them. We're going to have a meeting where all of the employees will be at, and city employees will be at. And because it's going to all the employees in the city, so we're asking people to do, different departments to do it, the larger departments, the school, and so on and so forth. And so they'll explain exactly what's happening with the procedure to have.
good, I'm glad to hear that. And I know the councils, just to the edification of the public, is that the city council is involved in this also, all elected officials, the mayor. I know, so it's not just city employees, it's every person that collects a check from the city that is involved in this. Then I'm going to ask a vote of the committee to vote. A yes vote would be in favor, or a no vote would be no. Councilor Arrigo?
Yes.
Councilor Morabito?
Yes.
Councilor Patch?
Yes.
Myself, yes. It's approved. Well, it'll go up favorable from the committee to the council on Monday night. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
The next item is motion 14-057, an annual financial report for FY 2013. George, can you just explain this briefly? I know all the councils have read this report.
Right.
They know it, all the hard work that went into getting a favorable report like this. If you can just touch on the main things quickly, appreciate it, because this will be placed on file.
Right. I have a couple of areas I first want to touch on. This is a different type of report than you have gotten in the past. It's something that, one, that we want to be in compliance with and receive a certificate from the Government Finance Officers of America, Association, and hopefully we've applied for the certificate, and hopefully we'll receive certification that our financial presentations are in accordance in the standards that they provide. The information in here is much more than both the City Council and the financial communities have received in the past. I'd like to thank the auditing firm of Powers and Sullivan. I have Mr. Sullivan here, one of the principals, James Sullivan, and I'd like to have him come up and give you a briefing of exactly what this report reads, and then if you have any questions, you can ask them of him.
Thank you.
Good evening. As George said, this year the city decided to put together what's called a comprehensive annual financial report. The actual financial statements that are contained in here, it's the same as prior years. So the financial statements, the notes to the financial statements are the same. But this report is about 20 communities in Massachusetts that actually do this and participate in the award program from the Government Finance Officers Association. It's just what it said. It's comprehensive. There's a section up front, which is a transmittal letter, which George wrote, in effect. It gives a little bit of history of the city of Revere. It also goes through some economic factors and where you're going. Things that were mentioned up front would be, well, obviously the casino would be on everybody's mind, and give people a little primer to what may happen in the future. So the front section is what you think may happen, how you got here, and then the middle part of this report is what you're used to, but in addition to that, you have what's called combining financial statements. Inside of it gives the reader a lot more information relative to the specific type of funds that the city maintains. Federal grants, state grants, school accounts that aren't a part of the general fund and aren't part of the budgetary process. It gives a read on the balances and the activities and capital project funds, some minor ones. If you build a school, that school will be up front as part of the financial statements. And then in the back, it also gives you information on statistical. And that basically, the statistical section, which is broken out at the end, gives a reader a long-term history. There's a lot of 10-year schedules in there. So the reader can take a look not only to see the City of Revere's financial position as of June 30th, 2013, but they can go back 10 years and see how well you either increased your fund balances, decreased, what were your revenues 10 years ago, what are they today? And so for financial analysts, it gives a wealth of information to see on a long-term basis what the city's doing. And when the rating agencies look at this type of report, it gives them the information they're looking at, because they don't focus just on 1 year. They focus on where you've been, how you've gotten there, the type of reserves you have, and have you maintained a consistent set of reserves in relation to the size of your operations. And it'll even tell you if, you say you had a dip into a stabilization fund, whether or not you replenish that, which is the normal course of action in case revenues decline in a particular area. The actual financial statements themselves, we as the auditors issue an opinion on whether or not these financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We have an unmodified or an unqualified audit opinion, meaning that it contains, and like George had said before, all of the information that's required to be presented on a consistent basis with every city or town in the United States, not just in Massachusetts. So there's a set of rules relative to how you need to have your financial statements reported. The best report you can get relative to that. A lot of work went into this particular financial statement preparation. Your financial condition, just because you put together a comprehensive annual financial report and you applied for an Excellence in Financial Reporting Award from the GFOA, doesn't mean that your financial condition is excellent. It just means that what you reported on is accurate and comprehensive. However, the city has maintained and has increased sufficient fund balances within its general fund and building up the stabilization fund to a level that I think the rating agencies may be pleased and take a look at it, because I believe the city has some additional capital projects as it moves forward. And the higher your bond rating is, obviously the lower the interest cost, and that can save on a long-term basis, a considerable amount of money in borrowing costs if you go that route and maintain that consistent fund balance. Other than that, the only big things, the negatives, which is on most communities, is the unfunded liabilities, both on the pension side and on the other post-employment benefits side. Together, I mean, it's significant when you get down to it. You've got almost $400 million worth of unfunded liabilities. Your real debt they have out there is not overly burdensome for a city your size and what you have done, but obviously that liability needs to be addressed. The pension liability, which is about $76 million unfunded, there's laws in place that requires you to fund that by 2040, so that liability, I think most rating agencies, when they look at it, understand that you've got a funding process in place, and over time that you'll cover that and get a fully funded plan. However, the other post-employment benefits fund, there's no assets set aside for that, and so what happens is you've got a higher liability because you don't have assets set aside that would earn investment income to offset the city's contribution. And if the city decides, if it has, and a lot of communities are starting to do and putting together the plans of putting money aside for this, although there isn't a law for that. So there's not a Massachusetts general law, but there is a Governmental Accounting Standards Board pronouncement that requires you to account for this consistently. A lot of communities are putting money aside, and what they're able to do when they do that, instead of using a discount rate, or in effect the interest rate that you'll earn on the money set aside of about 4%, which the city uses, you'd probably use somewhere in about a 7.5% rate. And what you'll find if you did that, as instead of using a 4% rate, you could go up to, say, a 7.5%, and your $330 million liability would probably drop down to low 200s, just for the effect of having investment earnings over the long period to help fund that. And so we're not suggesting that you do that at this point in time. We're just the auditors. We don't set policy. But what you want to do is make sure that you take a look at other communities in Massachusetts and see what they're doing, and starting a process that may start doing that. I imagine when George talks to the rating agencies all the time, one of the questions are, what are you doing about OPEB? And so, although you don't legally have to fund that, it may be an idea to start looking into innovative ways that different communities are using in order to start the cycle to put some money away. If you do put money away, it goes into what's called an irrevocable trust, not like a stabilization fund, a rainy day fund where you can draw that out if you need it. It goes in, it stays there until, in effect, you're fully funded. There's ways to take it out, but you have to go through a couple of hoops to do that. So that's probably the biggest thing in these financial statements that could affect your ratings a few years down the road. You don't want to be the last 25%. You want to be in the first 25 to 50% that seriously address that, just from a suggestion standpoint. But obviously, that's dedicated resources and real money that you have to budget in order to do that. And that kind of gives you an overview.
Just probably a couple of questions I'd be asked you, Councilor Rigo.
Just one quick question. In other communities, and I haven't done the research on it, but for OPEB, how much have they been, roughly, how much have they been putting away? Is it like, are they putting $1 million away, or is it 500,000, or?
Well, it depends on the size. I mean, if you come in the city of Revere as opposed to the town of Rockland.
Yeah, or a percentage of the budget, I'm assuming that.
There are some communities that, in effect, have made a commitment to fully fund the annual required contribution. Towns like Wellesley has done that, and so they have put in and made a commitment to put in significant money, several $1 million a year extra over and above what they normally would have spent. And most communities are starting just to do that now. There's probably 5 or 6 that are really fully funding it, usually the wealthier communities, usually towns, not cities, because the demographics are a little bit different, that they don't have as much need for, maybe as much in public safety and a few other things that a city has to deal with relative to its demographics. But what I see is a lot of places will start with an appropriation and say, all right, let's put aside, say, if you say $500,000 this year. and come up with a plan to say, we're going to do $500,000 this year. Maybe you could adjust that discount rate, and the next year, it's just a normal budget line item, and maybe increase it every couple $100,000 every year, or depending on what the budget allows. And so that's realistically what we see. Probably 50% of the communities now, starting small and building to a higher level, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Hess?
Thank you, Mr. President. Listening to what you're talking about here, this seems to be a well in-depth financial report, much beyond what we've done in the past, looking at all types of contingencies that may confront the city. As far as what is our percentage as far as retirement? What are we funded at? Do you know?
You're funded at retirement at, hold on a second. 1 second, let's take a quick look. You're funded right now as of 1/1/2011 at 58%, which is probably about average right now. You know, back in 2008, obviously.
Exactly.
But you're due for a new valuation, and if you think about what happened in the market from 1/1/2011 to now, but it all depends on a lot of other things. How many more, did you hire more employees in the last few years? All kinds of other factors go into that. So when the new valuation comes out, it may show.
I think what you were talking about as far as identifying a certain segment of appropriations into this account, I think that makes sense as far as a well-rounded financial condition report, because naturally the retirement is a major issue out there, without question. And I think we have to really address that somewhere down the road.
It's built in a lot of the plans in a lot of the communities, depending on your funding progress. You have until 2040 at the latest to fund the retirement system. But in a lot of communities, what they're doing is your retirement assessment is made out of two: a normal cost, what do you need to put aside this year into the retirement system to pay for what people earned in this particular fiscal year. And the big portion of that assessment every year is amortizing the unfunded portion.
Exactly.
And what communities are doing is saying, all right, let's see if we can be aggressive with the pension side, because that's a legal obligation we have to make. And once that runs out, and say if you had a past service cost for $3 million a year, well, instead of just taking that in, what they're doing is shifting that $3 million contribution not to the retirement system anymore, but increasing the contribution to the post-employment retirement.
Exactly.
So that's kind of a thing that a lot of communities are doing.
Well, Mr. President, I think the report is excellent. There's no question that we're looking at things we haven't looked at in the past as far as projecting our costs in the future, which I think we have to do as a city. And also what you're talking about as far as coming up with an idea. If we make an appropriation of, say, $500,000, we have to have an offset cut. Right. That's the bottom line. For a city like Revere. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Very well said. We're going to place this on file and go on to the next order. I just want to recognize Councilor Reardon, just came in, and we'll go next to...
Mr. Chairman, I just had one question.
I'm sorry, Councilor Powers.
I just had one question. I know in the recent years we've started to use point-of-sale receipt machines throughout different departments, and I think that's very important. Can you tell me, or maybe the finance director could tell me, what departments basically we're using them in now? And
we've distributed, we actually have two systems. One is the Munis system, and right now we have the Munis system takes in, which is the non-tax billing system, has 8 or 9 machines out there. There's Parks and Rec, city clerks, let me see off the top of my head. I believe special services, and I just, off the top of my head tonight, I just can't remember. But then we also have POS machines installed into the government system in the collector's office, the treasurer's office has one. And then we have one at the fire, and the library rather, and I think we have one at the fire. I'm not sure, but I'll get you a list.
Yeah, the reason I ask is the other day I had occasion to deliver a check in the amount of over $2,000 to a particular department. I don't want to get into that right now, what department. But we got back a handwritten receipt, a pink receipt. And I've always thought that any department, particularly where you're giving someone a large, this happened to be a check, but you could be giving somebody cash. They should get a printed out receipt just as you would. Like I was in the registry of probate about a week ago, and I had to give someone some money, and they gave me a printed receipt. It had the date, the time, and the amount on it. And I'm just wondering if we are doing that in every department in the city, and if we're not, why we're not.
Well, we're doing it in the majority departments of the city. We didn't do it, I know you worked on Parkers and Rec, we didn't do it then.
Yeah.
But we're doing it now in the, most of the departments in the city. We'll be rolling some more out, but however, the major departments do have them. I don't know the department you put a $2,000 check that didn't have it.
No.
But unless it's the License Commission could be one, or, I don't know the department, but.
Well, I can discuss that with you later.
We can discuss that later. But we are working on it, and we have installed them.
Any idea when that will be completely?
No, not completely, because we have other issues that we're dealing with computer systems right now, and we're trying to get those on board. But it was implemented, it started implementation actually 3 or 4 years ago. We had it in a, I think I put that in the CIP report, capital improvement report, back in 2006. And we're implementing it now, so it does take some time. However, it's also training the staff and having the staff, because we're really starting to build our staff up enough to take advantage of that. So that's another problem.
Something I'd like to see happen. I put a motion in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago regarding this, and I'd like to see it come
like
to
I said,
fruition throughout the entire city.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors? Seeing none, I'm going to place that on file, and we'll go to the next one. Is Council Order 14-058, Standards Report, Rating Services Upgrade Report. George, you got the floor again.
Okay, on this we have the city was pleased to receive an upgrade in our rating to a AA minus, and this puts us in a different, the importance of this actually puts us into a different rating category or investment category. So and it actually took effect, seeing this, and I'll tell you how it took effect. By a different investment category, I mean, there are some people who, if you are below this rating, will not even look at your instruments, whatever financial instruments you're putting out there. So we would get maybe 3 or 4 bids. We put out a bond issue, bond anticipation note issue, a couple of months ago after we received this rating. That's why we went for the rating. And if I'm not mistaken, the rate that we got was less than 1%. I think it was 0.49%. The number of bids went up from normally 3 or 4 to 8 or 9. So it shows we're becoming, being viewed much more favorably. I will have to say it was done, one of the areas that assisted us in getting this type of rating was this comprehensive annual financial report that you took up earlier, and that, if you notice, you have in front of you the report from Standard & Poor's and telling you exactly what the reason for the rating is. I would like to, first off, this is a joint effort, and the City Council, the Mayor and the City Council actually have quite a bit to do with this. The major reason why it's done, because you work so closely together, and you pass the budgets that need to be passed, and everybody assesses what needs to be done, and because we work together, that's why this is a success. The outlook that I'm most proud of is, and the city should be the most proud of, is the stable outlook reflects our opinion of Revere's strong budgetary performance supported by very strong liquidity and budgetary flexibility. For these reasons, we do not expect to change the rating within the Outlook's 2-year time frame. Credit improvements depend on the significant mitigation of the city's long-term liabilities and maintenance of its strong budgetary performance. Right there is a very powerful statement and gives the city of Revere a very strong rating, reason for a rating. So with that, I know when I talked to the mayor and myself talked to the rating agency, they were impressed. They were told about, you have to remember when you go to a rating agency, and I believe Councilor Hass will remember from his days as mayor, they take every little stone in the city financially and they turn it over and they want to explain and give them a picture of not only what was in the past, but what was also in which they plan to be in the future. We did do some estimates of actually what we see in the future. What I plan to do this year is go a step further and actually put a detailed forecasting, 4 or 5 year plan together, a detailed forecasting of exactly what where the city will be in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19. So that's what we're looking at. So we should all be very proud of us. We all worked on this, and we all should take the congratulations for it because, again, it was a joint effort. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. And the amount of money that we save, if you I think that bond issue was $6.3 million. We paid less than 1%. We paid less than 0.5% to borrow that money. So it was very inexpensive, and it's probably a percentage point that we saved because, again, we moved into a higher invested grade. So on 1% may not seem a lot, but if you have it on millions and millions of dollars and you have it over 20 years and you multiply it, it actually saves you millions and millions of dollars as far as the interest cost. So it's a very important thing, especially where we have $83 million of authorized but unissued debt at this time.
George, thank you. Any councilors? Seeing none, then you should give yourself a pat on the back on this also. I know you worked hard on this, as the whole council did, like you said, and the mayor. So this is good news for the taxpayer. But with that, we'll place that on file. Go on to the next council order, 14-068. This is a motion by the council president, Zambudo, to have the mayor establish human resource department. I don't think we can order the mayor to do that, but I think everybody here is basically in favor. We'll take a vote on it. I'll open up to councilors now. Councilor Regal.
Just a question to the chair. I know when Council President Zambudo put that motion in, there was also a motion of mine outlining the actual human resource personnel department and human resource department. Is this a combination of both those motions, or is this just Councilor Zambudo's motion?
Well, it looks like to me it's like Councilor Zambudo's, but I mean, we can attach the other one to this. I mean, my opinion on this is it's not going to be hired by July anyway. I mean, to get somebody that's really, you know, I mean, this is not just going to hire somebody to hire people. This is going out to have someone set policy, no labor laws and stuff like that. I think, you know, to do it right, I think, you know, the mayor and whoever and us, we don't know what it's going to cost until, you know, we come up with a figure. But my opinion would be to the mayor, maybe putting something in the budget, and we could, it's up to us if we want to fund it, you know, with the stipulation that the council vote approval of the criterias of the job of the department. So. Right, and what I had put together in my motion was an outline. It was actually an ordinance change, an additional ordinance, so which isn't an appropriation necessarily, but it sets the guidelines for what that position would be doing, exactly what their duties would be. And I think, you know, if it's the will of the council to just to set that aside and allow you know, the mayor to put in the budget and not have any say over what the duties and responsibilities of that position would be. You know, at least I'd like to have a conversation about that. I think that what
was put forward, or what I put forward, made a lot of sense in terms of getting somebody in that has the right qualifications, getting somebody that we know will do a good job, and kind of outlining what those responsibilities would be. And I would hope if this motion is just Councilor Zambudo's, I would hope at some point that we could talk about my motion separately, or discuss the two of them together. But I do think that we may not be able to tell the mayor, or we may not be able to say just fund a human resource department, but we can add an ordinance and change the city ordinances to reflect something that we would like to see. So if we're willing to have that conversation, I would look forward to it. Thank you.
Councilor Morabito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Councilor Arrigo, but I also think before voting on a human resource manager, sure, it's an essential department for a city to have, but I think the description of what the department entails, like whether the human resource manager will be part of the negotiations with unions, will they just do the hiring for the departments, will they do the firing? I think there's a lot of detail involved, and for us just to vote on this ordinance and not vote on both of them together would be a mistake. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Councilor Morabito. Councilor Hess.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that at the time of the discussion that Councilor Arrigo's was passed as an amendment to this motion. So I think it should be one the same.
Councilor Arrigo's ordinance was placed in the Legislative Affairs Committee.
Okay, I don't know why weren't they? Yeah,
I thought they were combined.
I thought they were combined, but again, we can resolve that later on. Now, getting back to the establishment of a human resource department, as we all know, we're one of the few cities in the Commonwealth who does not have one. I think it is greatly needed. Without question, when I was in the front office, I had a female that did a great job in there, and she saved the city a great amount of money. So I think it's imperative that we move forward with this, and we take Councilor Arrigo's suggestions, and I believe it came from another city, along with this motion here. Let's address it all at once. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Hess. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly agree with that this position is long overdue. However, I think that there definitely needs to be considerable discussion regarding this position, not only what the duties are, but at what point does the mayor, in my opinion, the mayor should always be the appointing authority on any of these positions. I mean, that's what he's elected for. And also, I'd like to see, discussion on not only the duties, but the salary, because this is a new position being created. It's being created by ordinance, and it requires a approval for a salary and duties by the City Council. And I hope that this is where we'll be going with this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Powers. Councilor Reardon.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not a member of the subcommittee, but I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. My observation is simply this. We're not just hiring a person, we're creating a department. If we're creating a department, it seems to me that the only wise way to do that is to get all the constituents here, meaning members of the City Council, members of the administration, perhaps union leaders, et cetera, and sit down and put together some sort of a committee and decide, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a one-person show, or are we talking about a department with a secretary and a couple of clerks or something like that? I mean, where are we going with this? God knows we are far overdue for a human resources department. I mean, try to find out, in this city what's going on. And there's a lady downstairs who does a great job, but she's the first one to tell you, I don't run human resources here. So it's well overdue. But I think if we're putting together what is ultimately another secretariat, within the administration. We ought to, I think, sit down and examine it from all points of view, and rather than just try to fund it, we need to get a committee together that's going to come up with some recommendations that we can actually consider. So I would recommend that, and Councilor Arrigo's motion should be joined with this, and maybe after we get done with this budget cycle, we can start talking about it. I don't think it's anything that we're going to be able to do overnight. Thank you.
Well, I agree with almost every councilor that spoke. To put it all together, I think we're pretty close there. And I agree with Councilor Powers. The mayor is the appointing authority. This person, to me, is not someone that's going out and being a person and saying, I'm hiring this person. I think it's a policy that Councilor Arrigo has to put to this. And then Councilor Reardon actually took the words out of my mouth. I'm reading this thing and it says the department. So does the secretary go with it? What goes with this? But I think Councilor Reardon comes up with a good suggestion. I think basically my opinion would be if the committee would go along, we'll send it back to the council. I think send it this attached to your proposal of legislative affairs, and now you can take them up both the legislative affairs, because we can't appropriate money anyway. And we can suggest to the mayor appropriate, we can only cut, the mayor has to appropriate it. But I think, I think a lot of councilors talk to the mayor. I think the mayor's on the same wavelength as the council. But I think, to get there, I think we have to combine this ordinance, with what it's going to cost. The mayor's going to have to, figure out where he's going with this also. But if we did fund it, my point earlier was if we did fund it, we could fund it with a stipulation that it's only approved after, the policy is put in place if it's by the council. So, but, to be safe on the safe side, if we'll take a vote on sending this back to the council to be referred to Legislative Affairs Committee. Is that fair enough?
Point of information, can we have a meeting Monday on the Legislative Affairs at 4:45?
At quarter, that's fine. We can do that.
Okay. I am. 4:45. Okay.
Okay, so we'll take a vote to send this to Legislative Affairs. Councilor Arrigo.
Yes.
Councilor Morabito.
Yes.
Councilor Patch.
Yes.
Myself, yes. It's approved to go to Monday night. The next thing on the calendar is motion 14-108 by Councilor Haas, senior citizen work-off abatement for water and sewer bill reduction. Anybody? Councilor Arrigo? No. Councilor? I'll go to Councilor Haas if none of the committee members to his motion. Councilor Haas.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Ashley, can you just bring the city council up to date as far as this particular motion? This has to be state approved.
Correct. This would in order to get the tax water abatement, that would need special legislation because it's coming from the enterprise fund.
And it's coming from the enterprise system, so whatever this costs, it'll be added to the enterprise system, right?
Mr. Anzoni might be able to explain it better than I, but you would need to offset it somehow.
Yeah.
The offset, what would happen is the offset for the amount of the abatement would have to be shared by the other ratepayers in order to fund it. So, although you're lowering the...
So it seems like a good idea, but the problem is the offset may increase everyone else's.
The offset will definitely increase everybody else's.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other councilors? Just a recommendation if you want to try to get I don't know if you want to place this on file or place on file. Okay, from them making a motion, we'll place on file. All in favor, all opposed, so voted. Okay, next count item number 14-119, renovation of City Hall, free cash appropriation. George wants to speak on this. Go ahead.
Yes. I have here the law. The reason this idea came about is because the very crowded and very poor condition of the offices at City Hall. There's an outlay here of the present offices and where they're situated. And then if you go in further a few pages, actually 2 pages, you'll see at that point where we intend on the first floor being the floor where the, as you enter the building where the clerk's office is, you'll see the renovations that have to be done there. There's going to be a switch because of definitely overcrowding, poor conditions of the building itself. We also have some roof structural damages where we have leaks that we need to fix. But you'll notice that where the assessors were, the collector's office will go. Where the collector's office was, the auditor's office will go. The assessor's office will go where the auditor's office was. And the clerk's office will be the same, but there's going to be renovations made to it. Where the mayor's office was is being split into 2. It'll become 2 different offices. One to the left will be the economic development, and to the right will be the purchasing department. So most of the moves are the financial offices, and we feel that this will make it easier. One of the main reasons to move the collector's offices, if you notice when you come into the City Hall, for years I've watched the citizens go in to pay their taxes, and they're going to one door and they're banging in each other, going back and forth. And you know, when you're standing in a line and it's a hot day, when City Hall isn't, or a cold day, and City Hall isn't air conditioned, or halls aren't that well heated, you know, it's very uncomfortable with citizens. So what we felt was that if we could get the assessors department, the collectors department, so that when the people come in, to pay their bills, there is a space in the lobby area, and they're not in the corridor, and they're not going to a single door, they're going to a double door. It'll be more like a bank atmosphere. With that, we'll be taking renovations upstairs at the, where the open spaces near the auditorium, next to the suite of offices, where the, next to the suite of offices where the MIS is located. There will be the mayor's office will be placed there, and you'll notice it's probably about 3 or 4 more pages in. I should have numbered these pages. It's this page right here where you'll see the top floor. Okay, this is the page we're looking at. You can see it from there. And you'll see that there's the mayor's space with a conference room. The city solicitor's office will actually be inverted so that he'll be down with put some private offices. He doesn't have private offices at the time, so that when there's an interview or there's somebody making a person making a complaint, they have to do it in an open office, and there's no privacy. That'll be inverted, and the solicitor will go to the other end of his office where the entrance will become to the opposite end. And where the City Hall itself right now does not have on this floor a laboratory or bathroom facilities that meet the handicap standards. And so we are taking the present area where the facility is and make it handicap accessible. And those are the renovations. Now, I know that you were looking for detailed plans. The detailed plans the council asked for at the last meeting, you want it more detailed than this? If you do, we can continue further on with these plans, and we will actually go out for drawings. I think maybe the best scenario right now would be is that we continue with the plans, and we receive the money to fund that, and then we have detailed plans, and we'll have a actual cost after we put it out to bid. So if we can do that, then that's probably where we would go. The recommendation was to take this out of the stabilization fund. However, rethinking that and knowing what the stabilization fund can be used for, and doesn't have the restrictions of a bonded account, that the new idea would be to now bond the renovations rather than take them out of free cash, and rather using up our free cash. I would rather leave the reserves in there because of the fact that, it's one of the considerations that the rating agencies look at to see how much we have, and they review how much we have in reserves. So with that, that's the general plan of it all. If you have more detailed questions, I'll be glad to answer them. However, tonight, at least that I'd like to know the pleasure of the council, because, again, these renovations are definitely needed. I've done renovations throughout the building in my 36 years here. You'll see the new treasurer's office that was upstairs for 1988. And then in 2007, I believe, the MIS structure was built here in the auditorium. And also the 1988, I oversaw the renovations of the assessor's office and the collector's office, and downstairs. So with that, we're also presently making some moves in the minimal cost. We're making some moves in the offices downstairs in the basement, which I don't have shown here. We're moving the engineering office over to the Office of Disabilities. We've moved the Office of Disabilities down to, which we felt would be better served, being closer to the elderly population in the elderly building down on, I just can't remember the street, Winthrop Ave, thank you. And so that was the first portion. The overcrowding upstairs in the Economic Development Office, due to the grants that we won and the personnel that we have, that the 3 of those employees will be going from economic development, not economic development, community development, and moving down to where the present office of the engineer is. And the engineer will be moving over to the present Office of Disability, and then further the storage room that's to the right as you enter used to be the old, at one time it was the old credit union, and then it was the Consumer Affairs Office. There'll be a employees' lunchroom there. So that's, God bless you, that basically is the plan for the renovation of the City Hall. And you can see it's somewhat extensive, but it's something that needs to be done because the efficiency of the offices are being affected by it. And hopefully that if this comes to fruition, we'll be able to utilize the space in City Hall as much as we can. God bless you. We also have taken into account, and I know Council Redden has mentioned about the old McKinley School. We've taken into account of that. We have plans for some of those offices there, other offices that are outside the building, but this movement is mostly for the most part, the financial offices that are here in the building. And they'll be cloised in such a way so that it'll be much more effective for the efficiency of the offices. Okay.
Judge, thank you for that summary. Councilor Rigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I'm going into this line of questioning, presuming that, given the statement of the mayor about kind of holding off on this until the fall, maybe, or after, sometime after, that we're not proposing to move this forward anytime soon, but I assume that's the will of the chair at this point.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know how other councils feel. I'll give you a perfect example. I was over in Malden not too long ago. They're tearing the building down. I think it's 36 years old. Sometimes, you got people walking in to the mayor's office thinking, you're getting embarrassed that, that's the best you can do. And hopefully things pick up in the city and you get these people coming and invest billions and millions of dollars. Right. And they're looking at the city, they can't replace a carpet in the mayor's office. I have a different opinion maybe than some of the councils, but that's why we're all here to discuss this. But okay. I'm not sure what we're going to do with this. I'm not going going to take a vote on this tonight. I mean, like I said, we'll get opinions from everybody and hold this over and, you know, let's hear what the council has to say.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, and I didn't want to get into a line of questioning if we're going to continue to discuss it, but I guess maybe for future reference, a couple of things that pop out, George. It looks like some of the proposed floor plans have desks, and some of them don't. And I think it would be helpful to have exactly what desks are going to be where, and you know, in terms of, I think some of the offices just look like they're blank without a desk, and some of them look like they have multiple desks. And I know, you know, looking at the mayor's office, it looks like he has 6 staff members in his office, but I know he doesn't have 6 staff members. So I'm just wondering, like, where the bodies would end up and how many bodies we'll have in each office, and if that could be kind of broken down, I think that would be helpful. The other thing, and I just noticed that a couple of the offices don't have departments attached to them, so I'm just wondering what those offices would be, if they would be just maybe if we have a human resource department, if they would be for that, or if there's other thoughts about where folks might land. And then I guess finally is any of the other movements or changes, you mentioned the basement and the 3rd floor. I think that would be helpful in terms of this discussion, just to understand all the moving pieces so we have all the information and we know exactly where people are. But I think this is a good first start. I guess as far as getting information, this is a good first step in getting some of the information that we had asked for. And I don't know if you have answers to any of the questions that I posed, but it might be helpful to have an ongoing conversation.
Okay. I agree, and I look forward to it. However, if you do look at Plan A100 and A200 down the bottom,
yep,
you'll see all the offices that have desks in them, except the city clerk's office. The only ones we didn't put the desk in, because at the time of these drawings, I don't think we knew where we were going to put everybody, but the people were going to fit in. We did all the measurements. Everybody was going to fit.
Okay, and the MIS office?
Honey? You're all going to fit. We're going to make sure you all fit, Ashley.
George, the MIS office, is that just for one person, or are there 2?
No, the MIS office is going to be touched. So that's just the way it is now. It's on the plan, because they did plan for the, and you're looking at the treasurer's office. These 2 offices on A200. These 2 offices are already in place. We didn't put the desk on there because they're staying the way they are. They're not being touched. There's only these dark line plans that there's some renovations going on there. So that's why the treasurer and the collector's office, the treasurer and the MIS in the training room and the printing room don't have any desk in there, because we know where they're sitting. They're not moving, and there was no need to include them in the plans.
Okay.
So that's why we did that.
Okay, and then in the mayor's office, is there a plan to have additional folks, or is that for maybe overflow of maybe interns, or it looks like there's a couple of extra spots?
Well, we did that just to space the desk in case there was any increase in staff. What we're looking at is having it so that there's a little bit more security in the mayor's office, especially today, in today's day and age. And people will not be able just to walk into the mayor's office, not to want to seclude it. They'll have open access to it, but at the same time as security is an issue that we're concerned about. And every one of the offices, in talking to the architects, every one of the offices that we have spoken about and deal with the public, we are looking at taking some security measures so that we keep our employees safe. It's not that we want to, buffer them from the population, but at the same time as we want to make sure they're safe. We have had instances in this building in recent years where it has been some either dangerous remarks, threats, or actions made, and That's one of the reasons I have in both my offices the bulletproof glass, because people trying, at the one time I had a half glass, and people reached over the counter and tried to reach at one of the clerks, one or two of the clerks. So to protect our staff, and I believe we have responsibility to do so. We have certain security issues going into these plans.
So is there a plan to have some glass at the city clerk's office?
Yes, yes, there
Okay,
is.
great. That's a great, I think that's much needed, and that would be, that would serve.
Very contentious office down there.
I know it can be, I know it can be.
What do you think? It is, okay, it is. Makes it contentious, I
Yeah.
guess.
All right, and I think, again, this is probably the good first step in terms of getting some more information about the plans, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rigo. Councilor Morabito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious, did the fire chief see this plan? Were there, I know you mentioned a couple of times that the building was in poor condition, but is it so poor that, is it poor enough that it presents a safety hazard or any fire, is it up to fire code?
Well, is it up to fire code? We keep looking at that, and we don't have a sprinkler system yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to put a sprinkler system in, be over $1 million. And that's something we were thinking about and looking at, but because of the expense, we don't know if we're going to be required at the end of these drawings and after the end of this exercise, whether or not we're going to have to put a sprinkler system in. And right now, we don't think we have to. We have the architects that are involved in constant contact with the building department and the fire department.
Why is it that you think you wouldn't have to put in a sprinkler
It
system?
depends on the space of change in the building. So if you're renovating a building, it depends on the percentage of the space that you're actually renovating. So if we don't meet that percentage, then we don't have to put it in. So that's what we're looking at.
Thank you. I agree that the third floor, it's overcrowded. You come into the city hall, it's very outdated, but at the same time, I'm not even remotely close to voting on this or even approving this or voting yes, but maybe in the future, let's see.
Thank you, Councilor Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George, no, I believe I was under the impression that Councilor Rigo was that this was on a hold. Is this back up?
Well, here's what we're doing. Here's what Michael told us, is that in order to keep the project moving, okay, so that we come to a decision, say, in November, October, November, what we'd like to do is, first off, take off the plate that the money would be coming out of free cash, or stabilization, free cash, I believe, right. And we're looking to bond it, so that would come off the table. But since there is a request to use free cash, what we'd like to do is, so you have very detailed plans, we'll have exact costs when we reach that point, is that $55,000 of the free cash be put into an account so that we can continue getting the drawings made and having it go all the way out to bid. So that when we discuss it again, we'll look at it and say, okay, we have the exact cost, what it's going to cost, and we have exactly what's going to be done, and you have very detailed drawings. And I know the council at one point asked for very detailed drawings, and you'll have that at that point. So if the council would consider that, that would keep the project going, have it so that we are doing what we need to do. We'll be doing our due diligence to get it done, so that when we meet next time, sometime in, I don't know what the council's going to do with this, but when we meet again and take it up maybe in September and October, November, whenever we feel is appropriate, we have all of the information in front of us, exactly what we need, the exact numbers, pretty much what we need, and then we can take a look at it then. But I would like to have at least $55,000 put into an account for the City Hall building account, for architectural services and engineering services, and if the council consider that, I'd appreciate it, so that we don't stop the work that we've already done. This has been, so far, I've put 2 years into this project, believe it or not. because one, you have to get a scope of work together, to get the architects on board, and then you have to put that out for an RFP, then you have to review that, we had to do it twice. So then we had to talk to each and every department head and see what they needed, what they wanted, and try to satisfy everybody. But everybody here is getting a better space than they're giving up, so. And the space is being utilized to the max, trust me, it's being utilized to the max. We don't have the funds to build a new city hall, not that I'm suggesting that. However, in today's day and age, to deal with some of the renovations, it's just so tough because, you know, it's well-built. It's a well-built hall, but the building. But the problem is that if you try to drill through the floors, it's like trying to drill through the deck holes of a ship. They actually have that hard oak wood. And to get a wire to go from one place to another on a computer, it'll take somebody a half a day to draw it through the building. So it's one of the problems we're facing.
I think the question was, I mean, at this stage, that's what we have to do next. Is you want to vote on a 55,000? Is that
55,000?
Well, Council Patch, it's not going to be up to George, it's going to be up to you and the rest of the council.
well, right? I mean, I just want to know where we stood, but I also want to say, listen.
The other people, yeah.
I also want to say that I am for this project because I think it should have been done. It should have been done years before, but and as we know, when we keep putting it off, it's just going to cost more money. So it drastically has to be done, and you know, I just want to state that I'm in favor of it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council Patch. Councilor Reard.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. I have to say, and I know you did allude to this, George, about the McKinley School. Right. I will say, first of all, let me say this. This place is a mess, and we need to do something about it. And there's no doubt about that. As far as I'm concerned, that puppy's left the kennel. Right. But we need to do it in a wise and considered fashion. And it seems to me that the City Council, and we have to congratulate ourselves on one thing, voted to bond the renovation of the McKinley School when we voted to for the New Hill School as part of that entire package. And it seems to me that expecting to renovate this building without taking into consideration what use the McKinley School could have for us thoroughly is a major misstep. I'll give you an example. I know that that the superintendent, and again, the purpose of our bonding in the first place was because the superintendent guaranteed that he would use the facility for his office over there. And we know that the high school needs his space, so that's kind of flowing into it. But he doesn't need the entire building. In particular, I'll point out that that he has a parent information center that he intends to put over there that utilizes interpreters for the various ethnic groups that come to our city. I mean, our demographic will tell you that we absolutely need this, and that melds in with the Mayor's Office of New Citizens. That makes sense. But it doesn't make sense to have an Office of New Citizens across the street from where the interpreters are in the parent information center for the school. This could be a dual-use situation, and I don't think it's been properly considered. That's one thing. The other thing is moving forward with these plans without budgetary considerations, particularly for this coming year, because it sounds to me like you're planning on doing it within, or at least starting within the budgetary cycle upcoming. It is almost impossible for you to do that without expend $55,000 to make plans. Plans to do what when we have no idea of what it's going to cost to do? Mm-hmm. And lastly, I would suggest that, as we all know, and the elephant in the room here is the casino. What we can do or afford to do with this building may be completely different come August or November, depending on how things break down in that respect. So it seems to me that any plan that is relied upon right now could be could certainly be changed given all those parameters out there. And I just frankly look at this plan as it appears to have been designed in isolation of all those contingencies I find kind of bothersome, that's all. Thank you.
Well, if I may respond to that. First off, you mentioned the Office of New Residents. That's one of the mayor's priorities, was making space for this Office of New Residents, and that's why it's on the first floor, the second floor, or the main floor, and that's one of his priorities. So I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know if his program is going to be similar to the one at the school department, or they're going to be different programs, or how they're going to run. However, I do know that it was one of his priorities. It may be totally a different function of what's happening at the school. The other part is it has been taken into consideration because the way, if the casino does come in, what else we can do with this building. This building, as it is, has very limited resources that we can use. You look at the building, you look at the structure of the building's over 110 years old, if I'm not mistaken, and to run a modern office in one of these offices is very difficult. The space is very crowded, and again, we didn't isolate just this building. We know about the building. We also, if you remember, we also had the school superintendent agree that for that $2.5 million bond issue, that the school department would actually pick the repayment of that bond up, so it wouldn't cost the city any money at all. And we do have an idea of what departments we can use here. The departments we're taking into account here are the financial departments, and we just don't think that, as I believe, that the financial department should be away from this building. They should all be here. We should all be able to discuss financial matters, be able to get one financial meeting together with all the department heads and not coming from all different directions. And that's why the main focus here was, other than the city clerk, that we were making the renovations that we needed. The city clerk's office was done so that there'd be more security there, and the functionality of the city clerk's office, especially paying tickets and so on and so forth, is just not right. And the same with the collector's office. But we did take other areas into account, and what we can do if the casino comes in, well, maybe, you know what, maybe we can build an altogether different building if we have the desire. But that's something that I think we should consider, again, moving forward with this project, because if the casino doesn't come in, then we're stopped, and then we're going along and, spending $55,000. We'd have the plans that the council has asked for, and we'd also have the numbers the council has asked for. So,
Thank you for the judge. Council Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George, with regard to the fire safety in this building, I mean, I think that's something that's so important. I don't believe we have smoke detectors in the building. And we're going out into the businesses in the city, and we're telling them they have to do this, they have to do that, and they have to do, or we're going to close them down. So I think that's something that should be very important in these considerations, okay? The other thing is, I think all of us here put an awful lot of, the city council puts an awful lot of time into the job we do up here. It's no longer a Monday night job. It's something where we have to meet with constituents during the week, spend considerable time with them. Right now we meet in coffee shops, we meet on street corners, in the hallway downstairs. And I don't see anything, unless I'm missing it in here, with regard to just a small conference room where the city council, where if somebody calls me, I can say, I'll meet you on the second floor or the first floor of City Hall in a conference room.
We actually considered that. If you look at the 8201, and you'll look at the corner, it's on 821 and others. If you look at where the mayor's office is, in the back office right here, that'll be the conference room. And that will be a conference room for both the city council and the mayor's office.
You're talking about the room that juts out there?
Yes.
Oh, am I missing something? How do you get into that room? You don't have to walk
get into
through,
that room from the...
right through the mayor's office to get in there?
You get through the mayor's office, and you go to this door here, or from the city clerk's office downstairs, or in from this council Chairman, through that door.
Okay, all right.
We did counsel take that.
Okay, so in other words, a constituent coming up to meet with a city council, any city councilor, they'd go in through the clerk's office and up those stairs?
Or they can go right through here.
Okay, all right. And the other thing, I somewhat related to this, I just heard yourself make a statement, and I want to, you said about the McKinley School renovations, the school department is picking up the entire cost of that, or are they picking up the principal or the debt service?
Total debt service.
But not the principal?
Not just the principal.
Okay,
total
so,
debt service.
yeah,
Right.
so I
That
thought
was
I
the-
heard something different just a minute ago, that's why I asked that question. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, councilors. Just got a couple of things, George. One is, I'm all for the new residents that speaking. We got to worry about the old residents that are here too. I mean, keep hearing new. A lot of old residents are here that, they can't afford to pay their bills as it is. But that being said, going out to bond this, you're talking $1 million. If you're talking over 30 years, I don't know if you're talking 40,000 a year or what it is, but we should have a breakdown of exactly what it's going to cost. I'm going to catch 22 for the 55,000. I'm all in favor of getting this done, but are we going to spend $55,000 and then at the end of the day say, well, we're not going to do this? Because then we just throw away $55,000 for plans like this. So I think before we vote on anything is that if you could come back to us with some hard numbers, or if it's going to be $1 million or $1.2 million or whatever it's going to be. Because I think when you speak $1 million, when you speak bond,
Right.
it's over the years. So now it becomes, if you're spending $40, $50 million in a $170 million budget,
Right.
you're really talking pennies. So, I mean, I think those are the different numbers we're going to need. I'm going to ask the council to keep this in my committee table. So if we can get the numbers of what the full cost would be of an I know it's estimated.
Right, but this is the reason why the suggestion of going for the 55,000. We'll then have actual numbers. Then you'll have actual numbers. I'll get you actual bond schedules, pretty much actual bond schedules. They won't vary much with an estimated rate on them, but very close rate. And then you'll have right in front of you a full package at that time. This is what I'm saying. You'll have a full package in front of you at that time to make a decision, yes or no. Now, it may not be that this gets done this year, but it may be in a further year it may get done, but we already have the plans ready.
Well, my problem is if you don't go forward from day one with the plans that you're anticipating putting in front of the council,
Right.
and
Well, we
you wait a
plan-
year or two, plans change, like you said, if the gambler comes in, I'm not relying on the gambler, I got my fingers crossed, hope it comes in. I think it's gonna come in, but we have to move forward with a city, with right now what we have.
And that's why we want to keep this project.
But I don't have a problem. See, I'm one council that don't have a problem for 55,000 because I'm for the whole project.
Right.
But if I'm against the project, I can see why I wouldn't vote for the 55,000. And I also can see not voting for it unless I know exactly what it costs over the 20 years or whatever years you bonded. So I would just ask, I'll have a meeting for next week if I have to for the 55,000, but I don't think it's going to take you long to get what it would cost us, over the bond, if that's how we're going to pay for it.
I get your cost.
And then let the council decide, if they want to go forward to 55,000 first. We can amend different motions and stuff, but I don't have a problem putting forward a motion of voting to 55,000 with a contingency, but I think, a week or two is not going to matter, so if you can come back with some hard numbers of, and I know you don't know the cost, could be $1 million, could be $1.2 million, so, correct, on a couple different figures. So with that being said, we'll leave that on the table unless other councils have anything. That'll be left on the table in the Ways and Means Committee. Next is the Wheelabrator Saugus Inc. Trash disposal account, motion 14123. This here, I mean, everybody wants to speak on it. It's a reduction in it. I think, I'm pretty sure it needs a vote because it's contractual. If you look at the numbers, the city's actually saving, getting $152,000 back this year. They're dropping the rate from $77 a ton to $64, and then over I think it's a 10-year period, it increases, but if you look at the increase of what it was today till then, it's going up 10% in 10 years. So, I mean, I don't see how we cannot vote on this, but I'll ask that the committee, if they have any questions on it, I will just take a roll call to approve it. Roll call to approve it. Councilor Rigo.
Yes.
Councilor Maravito.
Yes.
Councilor Patch.
Yes.
Myself, yes, approved. The next thing on the agenda, this is actually a three-tier part. We'll take them all up at once. This is loan orders and the resolutions for the CWF fund, planning and construction projects 3908, 3909, 3910, and it's communication from Mayor 14-126. Judge, you want to speak on this also?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. These projects are SRF loans, which are state revolving fund loans, and they're for various projects and to help us out with our consent decree. I have Mr. Robert Buttons of CDM here to actually make comments about these loans and discuss them further. He has a much larger presentation he intends to make before the City Council as a whole, but I asked him to be here tonight in order that he could bring the Council, the Ways and Means Committee members up to date. So at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Buttons to come up and speak on these loan issues.
Thank you, George. Well, can I just, before you go on, Mr. Buttons, and I appreciate you being here, and I will let you speak. Just to the council clarification, I'm going to ask the council to hold this over, only because a motion I put in probably 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, I haven't got any information, and to me, to vote on this would be a little premature till we get all the facts and figures of what was spent, how much money is out there still to be spent. And so I'll ask for this to be on there. But we'll let Mr. Buttons speak on these three things and get questions, and this way here, when we do vote on the future, we'll have more information. Mr. Buttons, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council and the committee. I just, again, am planning as part of the public hearing process on Monday night to give a more complete update on the status of all the consent decree work that's been done to date, where we are with construction of the various projects, and what the plans are for investigations and for construction moving forward next year. I came up tonight to try to answer any questions that you may have through the Ways and Means Committee. I did want to follow up with you, Mr. Chair, on the questions that you referenced earlier. I don't believe I've ever received a written response. I know when I was in a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned it during the one of the Winthrop Ave hearings, but I'm not sure I've actually ever received it on paper. So
I'll refer to the clerk on that. I mean, Madam Clerk, did we send the clerk says we did. I'm not going to question it, but if you didn't, we'll send one out tomorrow again, or an email out to you. It's basically information that you probably have. I mean, I know the mayor's office probably sent it out to you too. I know Laurie Giardella, our city auditor, is getting some information.
I was with Laurie earlier today as well.
So my thing is, I'm one councilor that needs that information before I go forward.
Okay.
We have money on the table, money that's spent, and work that was calculated. I don't know how far back it goes, maybe 4 years ago, and you know the priority list, and it goes on and on. So I mean, we have a $15 million bond thing in front of us here. 1.2 million, I think, and another 700,000. It's a lot of money to the ratepayers just to come up here and just keep saying yes, yes, yes until, you know, there's a lot of questions answered. So I mean, it's it's something that, you know, especially being the chair of Ways and Means, I think up here as a council is, you know, financial balance, you know, of the city, and I think we have to do a due diligence for the taxpayers and water ratepayers on this. But I'll let you go through your presentation. I'll leave it up to council for any questions.
Sure. And I will follow up on that information as well, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that.
Sure. The first loan order is CWSRF 3908, and this is for planning projects for investigations related to the city's sewer systems. It's looking for problems with water leaking into the pipes in the systems. It's looking for illegal connections between your sewer and your stormwater. We found multiple areas through the city, in the areas that we've looked so far, where raw sewage is actually directly connected to the stormwater system illegally. And sewage from people's homes is going right out into the rivers and into the ocean, and not going through the through the sanitary sewer system to Deer Island for treatment. So a big part of the federal consent order was related to those types of conditions, and this will provide the funding for us to work with the DPW and engineering to go and locate additional areas where these problems exist, so that next year and in subsequent years, the construction of these improvements can be done in compliance with the consent decree. Typically, our planning and investigation work is about a year to 2 years in advance of the construction work, so we can figure out what the problems are and then come up with an appropriate solution. So that's the intent of that particular loan order, and I will have additional detail for you on Monday evening. The second loan order is related to problem connections to your sewer system. And those are two areas. The sump pumps that exist within the city system are one area, and then there are also other areas, and I was explaining this earlier, Councilor, with respect to catch basins, roof leaders, and other problems where rainwater that's not supposed to be in your sewer system is getting into your sewer system. It's going through the MWRA meters, so you're paying a sewer charge on that water that you're not getting any revenue for. And most importantly, it's taking up capacity within your sewer system for wastewater that's supposed to be there. So it's very important that we find and eliminate these connections. We did and I provided this to the councilors at past meetings, but we did include this flyer out with everyone's water bills on the sump pump program, and we have had over 130, I believe was the number we were talking about this afternoon, folks voluntarily respond. In our office and in the engineering office, we've been receiving quite a few phone calls, and so far it's roughly 2 out of every 3 homes that we're going to has a problem with sump pumps in the homes. So it's a very serious issue that exists citywide, and as part of the city's efforts to comply with the consent decree, it's very important that we address this. The sump pumps, the challenge with the sump pumps, as I've said to you folks and to others in the city before, is in many cases the sump pumps are there and they're connected to the sewer systems because the drainage system in the area either doesn't exist or is inadequate. So that when we get large clusters of these sump pumps in certain areas, we may also have to do construction of drainage systems, tide gates, those types of things, so that the sump pump redirection will actually work and people won't be just reconnecting them back into the sewers. So that program is very important, and the DPW directors is very engaged in making sure that we can get these sump pumps out. Lastly, the construction project, which is the third loan, CW SRF 3910, the city was actually eligible for $19.25 million this year in SRF funding, and because of a number of considerations, the city and the mayor's office has directed us to only go after $15 million in funding this year, and that funding will be used to continue to do lining of the sewer pipelines, manholes, to reduce the infiltration and inflow, to rehabilitate tide gates. We've been looking in particular at the Martin Street tide gate that has a very large tributary area, and that gate is also failing, so we're looking at that as a potential project. There are a couple of pump stations that will be replaced as part of this effort, stormwater and sewer. And then this also provides a small amount of money when we find the sump pumps in the various homes. This will provide the funding to actually go in and remove the sump pumps, as a portion of the funding to go in and remove the sump pumps per the city's program. And then lastly, the construction money would be used to put in some additional sewers to replace broken sewer pipes, to potentially increase the size of various lines so that there isn't SSOs where the pipes are too small to carry the flow that's in them. So there are a number of things that will occur probably over a 1 to 3 year period with respect to these loans. They are all consistent with the requirements of the consent decree and with the discussions that we've had with the DEP and the federal government. And that's a brief synopsis right now.
All right, thank you. Any councilors? Councilor Arrigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of project number 3908, the sewer system being tied into the stormwater system, is that something that we've been working on previously, or is that a newer issue that's
Oh no, it's been a continuing, ongoing issue. Correct.
And do we have any sense of are there any kind of patterns in where these kind of hookups happened, or like where these problems are? I'm just thinking in terms of who actually did some of these connections and understanding kind of exactly what happened and how old this problem has been, or do we have any information on what the root cause of what happened in terms of this project?
Not sort of one or two main things that you could say that, half of the problem is because of this one issue. There's a variety of things that have happened over decades, not the least of which is, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, when the sewer system was built, a lot of this stuff was connected, and there wasn't the separation between sanitary flow or sewage and stormwater, and now there's very much a distinction between those two in terms of water quality and cost.
And okay, so I know that some of the problems are going to be 180 or 100 years old. Have we found any problems that might be newer that we, could have either prevented, or that we can point back to somebody and say, we know that you did something wrong here? And I'm just thinking of recourse in terms of, we're paying, I think, the city and the ratepayers are paying for mistakes that have been made over, as you said, 100 years. But if we can understand what mistakes were made in the last 10 or 20 years, and if we know that there are people responsible for that, I think at this point, we've been grappling with this for so long, and this has been such an issue, and it's been building, I think, in terms of frustration in the public's eyes, that at some point you want to be able to, I don't want to say point a finger, but you want to be able to say, we know that some percentage of this is old, and it's just lack of keeping up with our system. But we know that we also know that these people did something wrong, and if there are people that did something wrong, that we hold them accountable. I don't know if there's anything we can do, but it's getting to a point where I think people are getting very, very frustrated, and the chairman alluded to the fact that the ratepayers are getting to a point where I think it's unfortunate, and we can't do a lot. We're up here and we can approve these loan orders, and we can kind of raise our hands and say, well, we don't know what happened. But if there is a way to be able to point out that if there are construction companies, or if there are newer developments, or if there are things that we know happened in the recent history, I think we'd be well suited in actually going after some folks. And I guess that's it. I understand. I know that we're all frustrated by this, and I think it'd be helpful to know, going forward, if any of that, if there is any recourse. Thank you.
I'll look through the information we have, Councilor, and try to get that answer for you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, I just got a question. I think within the last probably 2 years ago, I put a motion in because I was concerned about at the time you were doing the similar thing that you're doing now, asking for a great amount of money. And I put a motion in that at the time, I want to know who was making the decision on where and how this money was being spent. And I put a motion in that it would, the decision should be made with input from the superintendent, the city engineer, and community planning, and that you all got together and you decide on what to do. I think at the time it was just, this could even have gone back from probably in Mayor Mazzino's time. It was just being made between the mayor and yourself, basically what was being done. I was wondering if did my motion make?
Oh, yeah.
Is it definitely being done?
We actually had a meeting this afternoon, and the DPW director, the city engineer, the city planner, the city solicitor, the finance director, and the mayor were all in attendance at that meeting. And we've been having them on probably a bi-monthly basis pretty much since you've brought up that motion. We have an agenda of items that we talk about and go through the status of the various projects. So we have a regular sort of department head level discussion, and then there are probably bi-weekly meetings that go on with respect to day-to-day decisions and things that are happening in the city, actively with construction projects and that type of thing.
Oh, well, that's good, but I really it's mind-boggling the amount of money that the taxpayers have to pay here for other people's mistakes years ago. But I'm glad that that's happening, and hopefully it's going to be money well spent. No disrespect to this was no disrespect to you. I mean, I just thought the more minds put together, that we could get more for the buck. Also, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a point. Ask you to do one favor for me.
Sure.
Down the end of Malden Street by the pump station.
Yep.
The second house in, not Vinnie's house, the single house where the police officer lives.
Yep.
There's a trench that you ran. I guess they must have been on a septic, and you ran you might have connected them to the to the sewage line.
Yep.
Could you have somebody check that? That's creating quite a problem down there, that trench.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Council Patch. Council Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir.
Yes, sir.
In your opening remarks, I heard you reference the Martin Street tide gate.
Yes.
I heard you reference pump stations.
Yes.
And as you well know, when the Rumney Marsh Academy was built, we talked about putting a pump station down on Martin Street to facilitate the movement of that water out of, because that water comes down Park Avenue, it goes under the Central County ditch there, it goes down through Atwood Street, and out through...
Correct. Very large area of the city.
Exactly.
Yep.
And are there any plans to do that pump station down there?
That's actually what we're looking at in conjunction with the tide gate. It's put in a tide gate so that the one that's there now is failing. I think you're aware the concrete's falling apart.
I am.
And in addition to putting in a new tide gate, sort of similar to the self-regulating gate that controls with the tide, for storm events, we put in a permanent pump station.
Okay.
So that's one of the things we are looking at.
Gates closed, the water goes back out into the open area.
That way, when you have a high tide and a storm event at the same time, you've got a way. Typically now the DPW brings in their portable pump to pump out behind that gate, and we're looking at making it a permanent connection.
We spend a lot of money on overtime doing that, and, it's not as efficient as a permanent pump station would be down there.
Correct.
Now, my other question is, the Eastern County ditch.
Yes.
Which takes everything out of the Wonderland area, the lower Revere Street area, goes down through Oak Island. down to Arcadia Street, hits that trash rack, and goes out into the open area there.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any plans to clean that ditch? I mean, the Phragmites down there, there's tires in there, there's wooden pallets, there's everything. And all that does is when that Phragmites dies, it lays there and it impedes the flow of the water along that ditch out into through that trash rack out under North Shore Road to the marsh area there. And you know, we've also just spent a lot of money doing that area down there near Intervale Street and Gladys Street. That huge area where you see now where I guess we can store like 1.5 million gallons of water down there.
The elevation, yep.
And that's a big improvement, but I think at some point the Eastern County ditch is going to need some considerable cleaning work down there so that we be able to get that water out of there, you know, in a timely manner so that it's not impacting the residents down there. So that's my question.
Sure. I can give you two responses on that. I was actually with the auditor and the purchasing agent this afternoon. We're working on a bid document for disposal of a bunch of material that's been previously cleaned out of the ditch so it doesn't sort of fall back in there. And we're working to get that out in the next few weeks so that we can get rid of that material once and for all. The other thing that we're doing is working with the mayor's office to make sure that the state resources to fix problems that they're responsible for are being dealt with and dedicated by the state, and that the city isn't stepping up and fixing DCR's infrastructure or Mass DOT's infrastructure, you know, at your expense to deal with your problems when they have a responsibility to maintain it. So in the ditches, for example, there's a lot of cross jurisdiction there, and we're working to make sure that the appropriate folks pay for what needs to be done.
And as well it should be. I mean, as you know also, we can't sidecast anymore on those ditches as of recently. I think if you have to live down there, experience the area down there, when there's a major storm event, you realize the importance of cleaning that Eastern County ditch.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing, Council.
Thank you, Councilor Powers. I'll just wrap things up here. Just so you know, I checked on April 28th. I actually passed that motion, so it was over a month ago. And it was a request of the mayor to have CDM provide City Council with work that was anticipated to be done. You went out and did a survey throughout the city. Work that has been completed to date, the funding that we have funded and what has been spent. And I know it's not all you, it's the city audit, some of it with the funding that we appropriated and the amount of money that we appropriated up until date. So I'd appreciate if you can get that to us. I have one, with these three different issues, I really have one thing that I mean, to me, I know we have to fix these pipes. I know we're mandated to do a lot of this work, but this to me is actually throwing money after bad money, and I'll tell you why. And some of this stuff, and that's why I wanted information, I could almost bet that we have funded some of this stuff before, maybe a different area, and that's why I need that information, because sub pumps been mentioned up here I don't know how many times. And how many times, but the appropriation. I remember us talking about what it costs the city. I don't know if it's Frank Stringer said 2,000 or 4,000 people we anticipate have illegal pumps that, you know, we go out and we would pay for them. But here's my thought. I know that you quoted earlier, you sent out something with the water bills to every household in the city. I've put on local access. It's on there every day. It's been in the newspaper. We have an amnesty program to people that want to be honest with us, that we will pay that cost because they're only costing every ratepayer in the city. So my thing is, why are we going to spend $700,000 to investigate illegal sub pumps? When we put all these notices out, the people are honest with us, we're going to pay for it. Once that date goes by, the amnesty program, it kicks in that if we catch somebody with illegal pumps, they're going to be fined, and they're going to pay for their illegal hookups. So the $700,000, now the biggest thing is, and we're all talking about putting new water meters in every single household in this community. Wouldn't that be the time to say, you have an illegal thing after the amnesty program. So to me, this $700,000 is in question. This is one thing that's definitely in question, that I don't care what federal judge you got to go in front of it to pass. He didn't say that consent order says you have to fix all the pipes in the ground that are leaking going into your stormwater drains going into sewer lines, vice versa. And the other question I have, and this is basically the CDM, is that the work that we know, and it's been said, because I don't know when you first started, it might have been 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that you did a citywide analysis of the pipes and everything, that we know certain work, if we did it 4 years ago, 3 years ago, would save the ratepayers an astronomical amount of money. So my thing is what was done with priorities, and that's actually part of my information I asked for. So I'm not going to vote on any of this until we get all the stuff back. I'll ask to hold this over and until we get all the information, because I know the mayor chopped it down from 19 you wanted to 15 million you quoted. And I also know that the mayor was in Washington 2 weeks ago to ask every state delegation that represents the city of Revere, senators and congressmen, to try to stretch this out over a 25-year period instead of a 10. Because, I mean, the seniors in this, you know, the people live here for years can't afford what's going to be coming. And I know some of this is, you know, bonded loan, but in the long run, the taxpayer is going to pay a hefty water bill at the end of the day. And I don't want to hear that the casino comes in, we can put money towards it. If is a big word, means a big word, spelled very small, but my thing is I think we have to really keep an eye on this. You know, the winter bath project's another story that honestly, have to say it, that somebody dropped the ball on that with the time frame from beginning to end. It went from, and I seen the mayor's stories in the Journal and the Advocate, and he was right on with it. And he's checking into all that, so I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of that. And that being said, like I said, I'm going to table all this if the council would allow me to committee, leaving the committee until we get that information. I appreciate you coming, sure. And I look forward to that information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that being said, this committee, Chairman, the Ways and Means Committee will resume. Well, I mean, I want to see when we get some information. Actually, we're waiting, so I'll hold it off, and I'll give enough notice when the next meeting is, and hopefully it's within a week or so. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.